Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 261, and today's date is January 11th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief for this Saturday. Before I get started, I just want to thank those people who donated. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. It really does help out the site, keep everything going. And let's get into the economic collapse news. We're going to head out to the UK, and right now the UK schools out there are fingerprinting children without parental consent. Schools in the UK use biometric technology to gather the fingerprints of over 800,000 pupils between 2012 and 2013. 31% of the schools, children were roped into giving their fingerprints, and they did not ask the parents whatsoever. And we can see what is happening. They are trying to collect as much data on the young, and they are making them believe that they have no privacy left whatsoever, because in the UK, there is a law, and before you take a child's fingerprint, you need to get permission from the parents, and they're finding out that they are not asking at all. And 3,000 schools across the UK found that 40% of the schools are using biometrical technology on pupils without parents' permission. And we can see this is a huge problem, and of course it all goes back to the same thing. They are cataloging each one of us out in the Eurozone, in the UK, and the United States. They are basically, we are cattle. We are being photographed, we are being cataloged, and then we are being put into a database and tracked. And we can see all of this happening because here in the U.S. what they're doing is they are stopping people trying to get their DNA, and as time goes on, this will be a mandatory thing where you'll have to give your fingerprint, you'll have to give your DNA, and all of this information will go into the federal database. And we can see it's already starting with DHS with the Real ID. They're trying to get all the states on board, where they're taking all your information from your driver's license and pushing that into a federal database. And we can see that the next step is, oh, with this driver's license, we're going to include your fingerprint. With this driver's license, we would like a sample from you. And pretty soon, they will have a complete social profile with all your information, and you will be tracked and cataloged just like cattle. Now, in regards to Obamacare, Humana warns of adverse effect with the enrollment of Obamacare. And really what Obamacare was is they were trying to get all the youth of America into the insurance. And everyone in their, in their teens, in their 20s, in their 30s would pay this nice hefty premium. And if of course they want everyone in, because if you're not in, you get a penalty. So they want everyone in, and they believe they'd be able to insure everyone with a hefty penalty, with high deductibles, and the insurance companies wouldn't even have to pay out anything. All they'd be doing is getting profits. Because really, think about it. A young person, paying, $400 or $500 a month or whatever it is, with a $10 or $7 or $5,000 deductible, will never meet that deductible. So the insurance company most likely would not pay out a dime year after year after year. All they would do is collect their premiums. And what we're seeing is that the young people, of course, now we understand that unemployment is very high, underemployment is very high. Many people went from full-time to part-time, and the youths who are going to college, the college graduates, cannot find work. And the last thing on their mind is health insurance. I mean, I remember when I was younger, I didn't care if I had health insurance or not. I thought, I was invincible back then. And we can see the same thing happening. They're loaded down with student loans. They can't even make payments to that, and then they expect them to go out and pay for health insurance. It is not working out that way, and what is happening is the older generation is paying for Obamacare, and of course the insurance companies have to pay out for them because they reach their deductibles very quickly, because most of the elderly, the senior people, are more often in the doctor's office getting some type of surgery or coming down with something, and they're realizing that this is a huge problem, and the insurance companies are going to start losing a lot of money. But don't worry, within the Obamacare, there is a section where if the insurance company lose money, the government will bail them out, and we can see that this is completely heading in that direction. And this goes on to say that Obamacare exchanges need young, healthy people to make up a significant share of enrollees. If not, the plans may be more costly for insurers, potentially creating a premium rate death spiral. And we can see what is happening right there. Now, we talk a lot about DHS and how the United States is becoming a police state. And we understand that DHS has built their force up very large. It's like a military within the United States. They have armored tanks. They have billions of rounds of bullets. They carry AR-15s. They're getting new uniforms to unite all the agencies, and they are now training all local law enforcement to work just like they do and to look just like they do. And if you don't, you will not receive money from us. And you can see a lot of the local law enforcement, they're getting the military garb, they're getting the tanks, they're getting the AR-15s, and eventually, when this all is said and done, there will be no more local law enforcement. It will just be under one federal umbrella, and it will be DHS, and that's what we're going to see. But again, they are arming all the different agencies within the United States, and one of the last ones is the Parks and Wildlife officers. And right now, what they are doing is they are training them, and they're creating these 25 highly trained game wardens capable of deploying anywhere in the state of Texas within 4 hours, armed with AR-15s, BDUs, and Kevlar helmets. The Dallas Observer notes that the militarization of every possible law enforcement entity in America is now complete. And the Social Security Administration, the IRS, the Federal Reserve, property code enforcement teams, and now Parks and Wildlife are all putting Department of Homeland Security's multi-billion-dollar budget to good use, because now it comes full circle. They are armed. They are ready to go. And we can see the push to get TSA armed is already ramping up, because we had that shooting in LA. They shot down this guy allegedly shot down this TSA officer, and of course, as soon as that happened, they want to arm every single TSA officer. And we can see what is happening right now. It is becoming a police state, and they are clamping down and locking down for what is about to come, and that is the economic collapse. They understand they cannot keep this system going. It is virtually impossible. Yes, they can change the rules, they can bend the rules, they can make up different scenarios to try to get money, but when all is said and done, eventually the system will come tumbling down, just like it did in 2008, and they know it's coming tumbling down, and they realize what is happening, and this is why they've been preparing for all of these years. Okay, now the EU leaders are now pushing for a one Europe government. Now, we heard this before. This is what they wanted to do. The Eurozone, they want a one military force, and now we're seeing that they want a one EU one Europe government. We need to build a United States of Europe with the Commission as government and two chambers, the European Parliament and Senate of member states. The vision would transform the EU into a superstate and would regulate individual national governments and parliaments to a minor role. So we can see that here we are, a full and total control of Europe with one centralized government, a control of North America, which would include Canada and Mexico, in one centralized government. And this is exactly what the globalists, the central bankers, want in the end. They want a one government. They want all these nations together, and if they could, they would spread them into Iran, Syria, China, Russia, North Korea. But again, those nations have nuclear weapons, and it makes it very difficult to get into those nations. Because if you ever notice, these central bankers always pick on those nations or move in with armed forces to those nations that actually do not have any nuclear weapons. Now, we understand in Africa, the U.S., pretty much the private Western central bankers are all making a play for Africa, and they're trying to capture the natural resources. And we understand that China is down there, and right now Japan has reportedly alleged that China is luring African leaders with expensive gifts and offerings as the two pledge big money to the African nations. China is accusing Japan of supporting Africa to secure a place in the United States National Security Council. And we have to remember that this is all because they know the end is near for the dollar. And the central bankers, what they do is they are capturing all the natural resources of every single country, trying to put them on the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency to keep the system going for a little longer. But what we see is that they are completely losing control in the Middle East. The people are rising up, and this is happening everywhere. And right now, China has pledged to double the aid amount to Africa to $20 billion a year. And this is why we see France, the Eurozone leaders in Central Africa, in Mali. This is why we see the U.S. in Sudan, because they are trying to protect and capture all the natural resources there. And this is what they're doing. Now, there was another cyber attack in Neiman Marcus, and we understand that Target, I think they're up to 110 million different credit cards were breached and PIN numbers were breached. And now we're having the same thing happen to Neiman Marcus. Luxury department store Neiman Marcus said late Friday that its database of customer information, including sensitive credit card data, was hacked and in December. And it's funny how it just comes out now that they were having a problem. And we're seeing a lot of this. And you have to think that for the last 2.5 years or so, the government was out there, using the propaganda, cyber attacks, hitting the power grid, hitting the financial institution, and then we had laws to take control of the internet with CISPA, which is pending in the Senate right now. And now we're seeing actual attacks where they are getting into all of these systems, stealing credit card information and PIN numbers. Is this a false flag to get some laws passed? And this is the question we really need to ask, because if all of a sudden now, since Target, 110 million people's cards were breached, and now we have Neiman Marcus where their cards are breached. We had Adobe where that was breached also, and now we have to see in the next couple of weeks if all of a sudden they come out and say, something, we need something to control this, and we just so happen to have CISPA waiting and pending in the Senate, and we need to pass this. And this is where this seems like this is leading, and this is where we might be going. Now, we understand that the Olympics are coming up, and it's going to be held in Sochi, and the U.S. counterterrorism experts are losing confidence in Russian security for the Winter Olympics in Sochi. And we understand the U.S. has also put up a travel advisory to go into Russia, and they've done this before with Sudan. They've done this before in the Middle East, and they've done this all across, and every time they've done this, something happens. And right now, this report says, I think the real vulnerability may not be within the Olympic Games themselves, but possibly outside the perimeter, where you're going to have a lot of soft targets, the House of Homeland Security Chairman Michael McCaul said. Soft targets are hotels, restaurants, malls, transportation that are not fortified or hardened like military government installations. And we can see that there could be some type of false flag being set up right now in the Olympic, because they've already put out the travel advisory. They already had the pre-bombings to make everyone think that terrorists are running around. No group took ownership of the bombings, and we can see that this might be playing into some type of false flag here. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.